Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar, Foiling Web-Based Cyber Attacks with AI-Based Solutions. I would like to introduce our speakers, Rangan Venkatraman, CEO of Pinochle, Pinocle's Chief Data Scientist, Kaushik Hathi, Kannan Venkatraman, Board Advisor at Pinochle, and Priyanka Sundar, Assistant Vice President of Information Security at HDFC Bank. Without further ado, it's my pleasure to open the floor to our speakers.
Thank you, Prashant. I'll let Ratanya give the introduction.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the highly anticipated webinar on foiling web-based attacks with AI-based solutions. Today, we'll delve into the transformative power of AI-based technologies such as CyberGPT, CyberGraph, and CyberTwin as they reshape the defense against evolving web-based threats and attacks. In our interconnected digital era, cybersecurity poses as a constant challenge. Web-based attacks continue to grow in sophistication, threatening our online existence. And to combat these threats, AI offers a lot of remarkable capabilities, which enables us to analyze vast amounts of data, identify patterns, and adapt in real time. CyberGPT, which is powered by the GPT 3.5 language model, goes beyond traditional approaches by analyzing textual data in order to detect vulnerabilities and identify malicious and suspicious content, and generate actionable insights with unparalleled accuracy. Complementing CyberGPT, CyberGraph employs graph-based algorithms to model complex relationships in the cyber landscape. By mapping interconnected entities, it uncovers hidden connections, detects coordinated attacks, and also identifies otherwise unnoticed threats. CyberGraph really empowers us to combat cyber adversaries or threats effectively. Furthermore, we will explore the concept of CyberTwin, which is the AI-driven virtual representation of an organization's digital assets. Through sophisticated simulations, CyberTwin mimics attack scenarios, which proactively uncovers vulnerabilities before the exploitation occurs. And this visionary technology enables organizations to fortify their defenses and often stay one step ahead of the evolving threat landscape, as cybersecurity is such a great issue today. Throughout this journey, we will engage in insightful discussion, and we will also examine in real-world case studies, and we can gain forward-thinking insights into AI-based solutions and cybersecurity solutions. And let's together unveil the potential of these technologies in order to prevent and foil web-based attacks and pave the way for a more digital future. I would like to thank each and one of you for joining us today. Your presence and active participation demonstrate our commitment to web security. Feel free to ask questions and share your perspectives as we explore the intricacies of AI-driven web defense. Once again, thank you so much for joining us, and I will give the floor to our speakers today.
Thank you, Ratanya. Thank you, Prashant. And thank you, Kannan. Thank you, Priyanka, for joining this session. Let me first give it a kickoff where I focus on why should you care. And at Pinochle, we basically call this the trinity of disasters in cybersecurity, which is not something that is unimaginable in today's day and age. What we call the trinity basically looks at a combination of attacks which is possible. So what do we really stand for, and what is our purpose? Our fundamental purpose here, of course, we can talk all day about specifically how AI can help the problem. AI is also a piece of the puzzle which needs to be analyzed from both sides of the fence, both on the offensive side and the defensive side. AI can launch attacks. AI can also defend against attacks. The focus of this conversation is to hopefully understand the defensive capabilities, and as we do more of these things, we can also talk about how AI can be pitted against AI, and when AI is pitted against AI, you're talking about a fairly complex situation. Today, as we stand, there isn't an option but to leverage AI for defensive purposes. The reason is the superhero and the supervillain metaphor works really well here. In order for a superhero to actually work effectively, you sort of need a supervillain. A supervillain actually needs a superhero to essentially mitigate the negative effects. The trinity of disasters is possible by the following. So, for example, you could have a situation where an enterprise is actually faced with a data breach, combined with a malware attack and combined with a phishing, attack. A data breach in this particular case could explain an unauthorized access into an enterprise database that may contain customer records, classified information, or exploiting a vulnerability, on an application. A malware attack could basically involve leveraging an infected USB. It could be an email attachment. A phishing or a social engineering attack could essentially mean it could be a phone call, it could be a text, it could be a combination of things. And today's day and age, a trinity or more of these attacks is something that we can see. Without the leverage of AI, it is nearly impossible to be able to act on it. We might be okay as we are looking at the world when you have a single, a monopoly attack or a duopoly attack. But the minute you sort of deal with more than one variable, you need AI because it sort of has to work across the layers of security. So that's the intro. I'll let Priyanka go next in terms of sharing her perspective, and then Kaushik as well, who will also be participating in this. So it'll basically be in that order. So let Priyanka go, and then Kanan. Thanks.
So thank you, Rangan, for inviting me and giving me this opportunity to be part of this webinar. And a great thanks to the panelists for participating as well. So from what I understand, in today's world, AI is really driving the strengthening of various cybersecurity solutions across organizations, but at the same time, it can also be used by hackers to launch attacks or make it scale the attack surface area. So it's very important to have the right elements of AI and use AI-driven cybersecurity attack surface identification as well as incident identification. So these are two different things. Once you know the attack surface, then you'll have multiple incidents across these attack surface. So it's important to have AI integrated into each phase of your threat hunting, your threat detection, and your cyber kill chain, so that there is a end-to-end visibility on how the attacker is trying to penetrate, or what are the assets that are getting compromised or would get compromised if this threat vector propagates through your environment. So having said that, having the right skills and having training for all the those who are triaging the incidents, or those who are at the first line of defense as well as the second line of defense, is very important, so that they can help to identify the right points of data which will enable faster resolution or response to the attack. I mean, web-based attacks have been common since several decades as internet has proliferated across the virtual space. But with the advent of multiple types of touch points, earlier it was just desktops and laptops, but now you have mobile devices, you have IoT devices, you have connected cars, you have web apps, you have mobile apps. So the attack surface area just keeps increasing exponentially, because every software that you're using, or rather every device that you're using, has a different OS. So having that leverage to scale across platforms, technology platforms and OS platforms, and still defend is the key challenge here. So I think API security is one key aspect here, which we'd like to discuss in our subsequent discussion. So I hand it over to Rangan, or
Thank you, Priyanka. To add to what Priyanka just talked about, she was referring to threat detection and prevention. She was talking about behavioral analysis, talking about incident response and automation, vulnerability management, fraud detection, to name a few. There is also the ability to leverage AI for user authentication and access control, as well as other forms of security analytics. We can go into a lot of depth with respect to each of these different areas. One, question, that I'd like to pose to Kanan in this session is actually to discuss perhaps security vulnerabilities in an AI-powered world, where we are talking about the cybersecurity related challenges that may come from an AI-powered code generation, for example, either the benefits or the challenges associated with it. We can start there as a continuation to what Priyanka just mentioned.
Certainly, Rangan. I think when you look at the applications of generative AI in the SDLC cycle, let's talk about that first at a conceptual level. There are various aspects of applications of generative AI in the SDLC. Starting off with coding assistance, moving down the value chain, which is testing and error identification, security and vulnerability management. Then you have deployment and compliance, and then cost management. Double clicking on this, starting with coding assistance. First and foremost, AI tools like autocomplete and debugging can significantly speed up coding tasks. They also generate working code and propose solutions to problems. In the case of testing and error identification, AI can identify potential errors in the code, offer solutions, and generate code fixes based on previous successful builds, thereby leading to higher productivity. In the case of security and vulnerability management, AI can identify and explain security vulnerabilities in the code, suggest fixes, and assist in resolving common vulnerabilities and exposures, also known as CVEs, and common weaknesses and enumerations, also known as CWEs. Deployment and compliance is another large bucket. AI supports DevOps engineers in ensuring proper deployment, including clearing security controls, governance, and GRC, and as well as adhering to laws and industry standards. And last but not the least, all of this productivity leads to cost management, which is helping manage cloud costs by automating policy creation, providing customizable cost dashboards, and integrating cost management into the development pipeline. And in terms of benefits and potential savings, integrating generative AI into the SDLC can approximately improve efficiency by about 30%, which is substantial cost savings in this day and age. AI also empowers developers, making them more productive and efficient, which is crucial considering the scarcity of programming talent in this area. And last but not the least, the use of generative AI technologies accelerates innovation by clearing the backlog of customer requested features, allowing developers to focus on new challenges. So to summarize, when you look at the core and common of what generative AI does, is that it helps the organization's scarce resource focused on innovations while automating the core and common of what you would commonly associate with an SDLC. I hope that helps.
Thank you, Kanan. Thank you, Priyanka. Kaushik, would you like to add anything to this?
Thank you, Rangan, and thank you for all the wonderful insights Priyanka and Kannan have already given. So I'll just go back to the title again and look at this as, what is this, foiling web-based attacks? So from what I've observed is there are two different kinds of AI-assisted attacks that is possible. And we have seen these two kinds more often and more pervasive in the recent months since ChatGPT and those of the kinds. What is happening is, with the existing attack vectors, AI is enabling hackers to be very precise, whether it is spear phishing, whaling, etc., social engineering. So the precision of attack, even with existing attack vectors, is becoming more and more successful or direct in its attempt to trick users and get into the organization. So that is one kind of attack that's happening. And why this is happening is, like, Priyanka already mentioned, because of the digital presence and the explosion of internet and IoT, etc. So all of us, including me, we all have digital footprints. So a malicious actor or a threat actor who wants to have a spear phishing campaign might use these kind of technologies to do an extremely thorough reconnaissance, and that could be used against us. So that is a very serious threat already, because the success rate of such breaches can be substantially increased using generative AI. That's the one kind of threat that's already happening. Then there is the second kind, wherein evolution of new attack vectors. So this is probably, we are still in the dawn of that thing, wherein as Kannan mentioned, how we are using AI to review codes and even write code for us. So what happens if a threat actor gets into the organization or hacks into the APIs and injects a code into our code, which basically means it's like you are becoming a parasite, and then you spread throughout the organization using AI to get into the organization directly. So that is one attack vector that is evolving right now. So as I said, the second, that there are many more attack vectors which will evolve in the very near future, because of the way generative AI is becoming more pervasive. So I see these two as two broad categories of generative AI based, or assisted attack vectors. One is using existing generative AI to enhance web-based or reconnaissance-based attack of existing attack vectors. And then there is a new category of attack vectors which was not even possible until a few months back. So that's how I see these as the two different categories.
Thank you, Kaushik, as well. The way, to make this practical for all of you, one of the things that we really wanted to also show you is how we secure, the clients of ours, including ourselves. And of course, this is a small, sneak preview to the larger, mechanism of how we would do this. We consider this the critical set of tools that a company needs to have. And the reason for the word deep, as the prefix is because it uses deep learning, to further enhance it. Sort of the Maslow's hierarchy of customer, and the Maslow's hierarchy of customer cybersecurity, posture security. And here what we're talking about is, when we talk about third eye is basically the outside-in view of an organization's security. Third eye extend, as the name extends to its ecosystem, suppliers, customers, and others, to make sure that you do not have an exposure to a supply chain-based attack. Then the next that we go in is inside the network. We have two basic buckets. One is called deep context, and the other is deep mesh. Deep context basically takes the context of the enterprise and self-learns what the enterprise basically looks like. While deep mesh overlays other variables and other contexts of the industry, including, for example, the ability to map it to advanced threat vectors like APTs, AETs, and like what I described as the trinity of cybersecurity vectors. Then moving on would be, once you have identified your external, threat landscape, your, external threat landscape that includes your supply chain partners, then understanding the enterprise itself in a very deep way. Then you go into mapping into advanced persistent vectors that can essentially marry the context of the enterprise with what the APT threat actors are up to. That's an important one, because it allows you now to actually predict an attack. Now, again, the fundamental of using AI here is the ability for us to predict. What has always been challenging with respect to cybersecurity is cybersecurity has always played a defensive and reactive role. It has not actually moved into the predictive space as much as people would like to. And the only ray of hope really is to be able to combine various technologies and operate at that intersection at scale. An example, of course, AI is for sure. It plays a pretty big role here. And then, of course, you have deep learning. Then, apart from that, you have graph analytics as well as NLP-based GPTs, which can be leveraged to combine the effectiveness of various technologies. Deep Heal essentially is a process in which we will not only identify it, but actually remediate it at scale. Deep Red will also include breach and attack simulation, which is constantly a method to keep upping the game. And of course, Deep Detect is the process that you would actually use to detect an intrusion. So the goal is to further first strengthen your outside, strengthen your inside, ensure that you have timely methods in which you are actually remediating your environment. Then you continue to keep upping the game, because the truth to be said, the only way you're really going to up the game is to actually do breach and attack simulation and then have an advanced process for timely detection, which reduces your mean time to detection. That's the process that has to happen. Now, with this said, right, one of the things that when we work with customers, what we generally do is we take what we call the camel approach. And this is a very important metaphor here, because the camel stands for essentially a long-term view. It ensures that you're in a position to endure, just like how camel is able to endure the harshest conditions. We believe that the way you endure the challenges of cybersecurity is to ensure that solutions are able to endure the ever-changing landscape of cyber threats. Like the camel's ability to withstand challenging conditions, we ensure the long-term security of our digital assets. And that's a process, of course, that leverages AI and among other things. The other aspect that we also have to really remember, just like what I said, is about the trinity of the cybersecurity threats. We almost have to have the attitude of the conquer the unconquerable. And the representation here could be the equivalent of a monkey god that typically, called Hanuman, where we leverage expertise, innovation, and dedication to overcome the complex threats. And any solution stack has to be able to do that. The water purifier analogy is an important one, because the goal of AI or any technology should be to ensure it's plug and play, and it should have the effortless plug and play that a water purifier typically gives you. And this is nothing but a threat purifier at the end of the day. The metaphor of a tree also comes here, because through effective breach and attack simulation, you learn the context of your environment extremely well. That allows us to ensure that the tree's roots as well as its thickness are thickened through that process. In all of this, it requires a combinational effect of different technologies sort of coming together to fortify a company's defenses. These proactive measures, continuous monitoring, adaptability is the key here. That's the stack that we basically use. So if you really see how this works as an illustrative and a practical example, there is fortification of the layers that happen at various levels. And that's what we call deep secure. And that's essentially how this sort of starts to come to life. Priyanka, would you like to add anything to it?
Yeah, thank you, Rangan, for that informative brief on how Deep Secure can help in AI-driven cybersecurity solutions. I think what I'd like to add is few statistics on how how AI is so important in today's world. If you see, like as I mentioned earlier, the attack surface area has increased with multiple devices that we use, and in January 2022, as per one of the surveys conducted by Business Wire, 65% of organizations' business strategies were found to rely on API integrations. Now, API integrations are nothing but application program interfaces that help you connect and communicate to various applications or platforms, various applications running on different platforms, so that there is ease of communication across multi-platform, landscape. So if you have coding in a particular language and you want to communicate with another code in a different language, then you typically use an API connectivity. So if and in the last few years, like in January 2021, literally 55% of the DDoS attempts against APIs were found at least monthly in these organizations that were using API integration. So if you see that, and the average annual loss, cyber loss in US alone, pertaining to API related losses, is like mounting to USD 12 to 23 billion. And that's huge, so to speak, that we are so advanced in connectivity across platforms and all, and that is a thriving space, I would say, because that helps us communicate well, communicate distant as well, but it comes with its whole lot of risks. And worldwide, this amount has just skyrocketed to 41 to 75 billion USD on an average annual API related cyber losses worldwide. So that's a huge sum if you see. And unless we quantify, the API security gaps and give an illustration to management on how these are actually impacting business revenues, how they're impacting our product performance, our customer audience, unless we give quantifiable, graphs or quantifiable representation, the management wouldn't know its impact. And this will be a great point for them to help in decision making as well, so that they can factor in, what would be the ROI benefits if we do implement API into that, as Kannan mentioned, into the SDLC lifecycle, that's DevSecOps. If you have that integration of API and into DevSecOps, so that you are ironing out some of the, coding level gaps that cause these web attacks. For example, cross-site scripting or SQL injection, where you can have controls like input invalidation, rate limiting, and so on and so forth, which can give you a good blend of not just having real-time detection and security, but also proactive security, which works right from the design phase or from the development phase. That's the security by design concept that you deploy there. So I could go on actually with this, but I'll give others a chance to talk as well.
Thank you, Priyanka. I would say that just to bow tie what she just said, to mitigate against API-based attacks, we're looking at, to relate to both what Kannan and Priyanka said, it's really about implementing secure coding practices. For example, for the technical people here, it's about looking at input validation, parameter sanitization, enforcing authentic, strong authentication, authorization mechanisms. Additionally employing any sort of rate limiting, traffic monitoring, anomaly detection. All of those things are only possible if we leverage advanced technologies. Now, coming to this particular picture, which is on the screen, it's really about how we look at an attack surface. An attack surface, in military terms, is essentially the amount on the space that you have lent. As much as it's nice to use new technologies, it's very important to tighten one's attack surface. So how do you actually mitigate against these challenges? Irrespective of the defensive technologies you leverage, attack surface visibility is an extremely important component, because the challenge is, I know what I know what I don't know, and I don't know what I don't know. So AI, for example, really comes in, and advanced technologies of attack surface management, which is an area that we exclusively focus on, really focuses on the third component, which is to ensure that you go from I don't know what I don't know to I know what I don't know. And that's a very important transition. And this particular model allows us to identify, self-learn the environment, auto-heal, as well as be resilient through the process of the life cycle of how you transition from one to the other. Kaushik.
Thank you, Rangan. Yeah, I want to address the same things, encapsulate what Priyanka said and you said, probably in a layman's term for those who might not be technically superior in this specific field in this webinar. So attack surface, I would give an analogy of a house. If my house, I have, let us say I'm living in an independent house and somebody wants to burglar the house. So what are the possible entry points that are open for somebody to get entry into? It could be, for example, chimney, or cut through the window and jump through the window, or even break open the door. So these are some of the entry points. So that can be, it's an analogy to attack surface. But now, if you take this analogy to businesses, we had some amount of open areas for any malicious actor to enter into. Then this was attack surface. But now with advent of industry 4.0, IoT devices, etc., we have more entry points. So our attack surface for an organization has increased, and it becomes a very difficult task, as you rightly mentioned, Rangan. So you don't know what you don't know. So to fix a problem, you have to first identify where is the problem. So unless you know where is the problem, how can you fix the problem? So discovering the problem itself is sometimes a very big challenge. And one of the key areas that Priyanka referred to was API. API obviously is most widely used in any software industry, even manufacturing and other sectors, wherever there is a use of any kind of CRM, ERP, whatever software. So APIs are very widely used, and it's a huge attack surface area for threat actors to snoop into.
And as we have talked about, you can see that we sort of operate at the intersection of where you have a vulnerability, where you have an asset, and where you have a threat. At the end of the day, it's the ability to marry the threat with the asset and the vulnerability. So each asset can come with lots of vulnerabilities, and that can be tied to a lot of threats. As we can see, it's impossible for the human eye to actually work on these things. And so as we can look at this, right, you can see the matrix of, unknown. And I think the area where AI plays a very important role in the lower quadrant is that you're dealing with, the ability to marry the unknown actor to the unknown attack. And which means that, when we say unknown, we're really talking about unknown to the human eye, because the human, ability typically is limited both in scale and scope. So the only way to do this is through machine, scale. And that's essentially what third eye, is aimed to perform in this particular case. And that can also be extended to other aspects, including, for example, coding practices and things like that, which is what Kannan earlier articulated. Now, let's talk about how we marry the context of the environment to advanced threat vectors. Today, that's a space that we really specialize in, and I think it's important for all of you to know, because this is one of the most advanced areas in cybersecurity, and there's very, very few companies in the world that actually even do this today. I'll let Kaushik take it away from here.
So we are in a state where we are data rich and insight poor. So we have all kinds of qualitative and quantitative information, either coming from logs, our ability to understand and assess our collaborators or vendors or clients or whatnot. So we have lots of data, but insight becomes very difficult because we are unable to construct a context to this data. So unless we look at data in a context, it's very hard to get insights out of it. So if I just say, if I just say somebody's weight is like 70 kilos, and if I don't give their height, then you have no clue to assess whether or derive an insight whether this person is obese, underweight, or overweight. So you have to have another associated data point to get the insight, and that these two data points have to be married together, which is like height and weight. Only then makes BMI, and now we know where we stand on weight or BMI chart. So that's one example. So in a business context, while you are looking at one particular data, for example, network logs. So while you are looking at it, there might be some other activity that might be happening in a other area of the organization. For example, a sudden increase in the load of one of your critical servers, or somebody's system overheating for unknown reasons, or probably for the first time since he has been or she has been using that system. So there might be unrelated activities which might indicate that a threat is actually in the making. So you will miss the story if you are looking at only one strata or of the data and not connecting the dots together. So this is where graph analytics and context building, even semantic technologies comes into picture. And this is one example that you are seeing on how everything is connected to something else in the business. Especially in a context of cybersecurity. Your network logs is connected to your firewall. The firewall is connected to some DMZ that you have defined, or or applications that you are publicly facing. The number of users that they are at any given point, people are using these applications. Who has the access? Who is the admin for this application? Where is the application hosted? Is it a cloud or internal? And if it is a cloud, where exactly is this? Is it what cloud provider, what region? So the story can go on. And unless you connect the dots, you miss the insight. So this is one example to show how in an organization, several things can be connected to each other. And you have to have a panoramic view to get the big picture. If you are not, if you are unable to get the big picture, then it's still just data rich, but insight poor. And without insights, you really can't do much with just data. Data are just facts and numbers. Back to you, Rangan.
Thank you. Just to summarize what Kaushik said, graph analytics here in cybersecurity is basically comes from graph theory and network analysis techniques. The idea here is to detect patterns, relationships, and anomalies. What we're trying to do here is to interconnect nodes with relationships, which is basically vertices and edges. The goal of this is to ensure that very complex things can be predicted. For example, threat intelligence analysis, network traffic analysis, user behavior analysis, social network analysis, vulnerability management, fraud detection. So if you take half a dozen of these things, they're highly interconnected. So the ability to identify patterns in all of this is a very powerful way to analyze and visualize complex security data. This will ensure that we have the insight, to Kaushik's point about being insight rich, not just data rich. Here's where the flavor of the data rich actually happens. If you are going to combine network traffic, user behavior, social network, vulnerability management, fraud into this picture, you're really talking about thousands of variables that need to be analyzed. So the goal is to make sure that we have an insight into this interconnected nature of threats, vulnerabilities, and entities. This is how we can essentially make informed decisions, improve incident response, as well as strengthen our defenses. That's essentially at the nutshell of where this is. Kannan, would you like to add anything at this point?
Just unmuted. I think the reality is, as we've talked about AI, we've talked about SDLC, we've actually talked about the products that Pinochle AI has. I think there is also a certain set of concerns that one actually needs to bring up while we talk about AI in the context of security products. At the end of the day, there are security vulnerabilities as far as AI code power generation is concerned. And while generative AI tools can certainly assist in code generation, there is also a risk of introducing security vulnerabilities if the AI models are not adequately trained to prioritize security best practices. In general, I think organizations also need to ensure that the generated code also follows secure coding principles, and that will include input validation, proper error handling, and protection against common security risks, as well as injection attacks and cross-site scripting. Privacy and data protection is another one that comes to mind, where whenever we use external AI platforms or services for code reviews, it is very important that we consider the privacy and security of sensitive data that are shared by these platforms. So I think in general, organizations should carefully evaluate the data protection measures that are implemented by service providers or platform providers and ensure compliance with relevant privacy regulations. I think that's pretty much what I wanted to share, Rangan.
Thank you. Here's where we essentially, talk about the evolution of how an organization needs to strengthen its security posture. Many organizations today may be at level 1, which is foundational. The goal of the process that we have is to ensure that you're future ready, which means that you're 4x better at stopping an attack, 4x better at detecting an attack, 4x better at, say, recovering and responding when you have an attack. The goal is to improve the maturity. And what you're seeing in front of you is the maturity graph that essentially takes you to an advanced, proactive, and rather predictive ability to be ahead of the game. And most organizations, as we know today, are either, very, they probably don't have a big presence in, cybersecurity. And some may have spotty presence, which means that they've done, 1 or 2 things, but still not have brought the pieces together. There's very few in the future ready. And our mission and our purpose at the end of the day is for organizations to be ready for any form of an attack, including APTs and the trinity of cybersecurity disasters, and ensure that they're future ready. And that's really the goal, that we have. We'd like to open, Priyanka, if you have any other things to add, feel free to, and then we'll open the floor for Q&A.
So I just like to add 2 cents is that in security, the more is less and the less is simple. So we need to break down what we want to achieve into pieces which are digestible and achievable. But then without losing sight of all the interconnected controls, the interconnected landscape, the user connectivity, the vendor partner connectivity, and all of that. So having AI to support and assist in a proactive analysis of all of this can be a good starting point rather than just integrating AI into your solutions and systems. I think having that, and then, quantifying the cost benefit analysis for the management so that there's more buy-in and there's more assurity of how you're going to use it in future and how it's going to benefit in the long run. So AI is having its own pros and cons, as our panelists also have mentioned. So it's good to be prudent on your investing in such advanced technologies by making sure your environment is prepared for this integration. If it's not prepared, then you're just introducing another difficult to manage and solution which is already going to find more gaps in your existing environment. So we need to make sure you are mature enough to have that integration. So that's just what I wanted to add.
Thank you, Priyanka, and I'll give it back to Prashant for Q&A. Thank you for the participants. And we open any questions. Thanks.
Coming after the same one here. So there's an interesting question from Gabriel here. What are the security measures for deep fake AI tactics? Which I think is an interesting question here.
Yeah, so I would like to answer that question, as well as another question which was asked previously. So I will start with the previous one by David Bonner, if that's okay. So what I really liked about the question is the question goes like this: we will be developing a new system, and I want to have AI issues addressed from the outset, and not dealt with as an afterthought. This is a fantastic question, and I'm happy you are having this conversation at the early stages itself, because according to top 10 OWASP problems in web security, OWASP is a very recognized organization which comes up with this most widely exploited problems in the world through cyber attacks. So one of the key things that they address is design problems. So there is no solution for design problems. The only thing is you have to start early. So you have to integrate secure design principles at the start of the project itself. So that's so I'm happy that you are starting your project having this thought in mind. So there are few things under that, and I just want to hear a few follow-up questions about web-based attacks, and do you have any umbrella view against all forms of AI attacks? So I just want to have follow-up answers for these as well. The thing is, as Rangan had also mentioned earlier, one of the key things is as the attack surface is evolving, we need to continuously discover where could be the problems. So this is where we are using AI to discover the problems. So discovery will let us know what we didn't know that we didn't know. And once we know where the problem lies, then at least having that awareness will help you either go and fix the problem if it is immediately possible. If not, have several layers of protection against that particular vulnerability, unless your business situation is unable to attend to it immediately. Yes, sorry, David, if you want to add something, please go ahead.
You have covered it perfectly. My problem is I want to have a closed loop internally, but we need to have external correspondence. But the external correspondence could come in a variety of ways globally. As I read what you've been presenting, it's by and large been identified as web-based. And what I want to try to get at least a mental picture of, so I can explain it to other people that we're working with, is an umbrella view of trying to protect what we think is a closed system, a closed loop, but in fact is corresponding with people at all levels. We think of the firewall. If you look at ancient times, the firewall is like a citadel. The citadel looks like, the city's protected, but it isn't, because you could have a Trojan horse come in and take over the city overnight. I'm thinking of systems where we are eliminating what is today a 20th century form of overhead in order to reduce in a major way the cost to the consumer of the service that they're obtaining. The implication of that is that on a fractional basis, I can envisage millions coming into this citadel, including someone who has a false veil on them that represents AI. And I can envisage, because we're dealing with energy, I can envisage for the people who would be using our service in the future, think of the worst case, complete control of all of your energy sources. No, I don't want that. Mm-hmm. You are my customer. I am serving you. Your buying criteria number one is safety in all forms. And so let me cut it short and simply say, do you have a picture which shows an umbrella of AI security protection? Here you're talking about web-based. And I'm thinking, going all the way back to manufacturing and assembly, how can we say to our consumer, your security is job one for us, and we are providing AI defense protection over every aspect of your service to assure your ultimate security? I'll keep quiet. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Your perspective is very valid. Although we kept the topic fairly focused on web attacks, we did along the way expand it to other types of attack vectors. Today we're talking about at least 1,000 different attack vectors that we can cover. One of the things that we actually did along the way was to actually show you the graph analytics, which really focused a lot more on covering for the types of attacks that you're referring to. And that includes IoT-based attacks. It includes other forms of network attacks, user behaviors, social network behaviors, fraud detection. So the number of attack vectors gets added. The reason we showed web attacks is because it's a very common problem that exists. It's probably the largest segment of the attack vector that gets used very commonly. In fact, you look at novice attackers taking advantage of this. So that's the reason why that was focused. But The solution essentially covers for every conceivable attack vector. And we also talked about API-based attack vectors. So this would cover for all the layers of security, whether it's perimeter, network, endpoint, the works, infrastructure, all of it, including cloud. We can go into it more, on a separate session with you based on the specific use cases that you're referring to, and we'd love to reconnect on that. But the short answer is essentially it does cover for all of that. So thank you for the question, and we look forward to connecting with you. With respect to the other question on deep fakes, I just want to tell you that today, we can take a multifaceted approach. There are detection tools that we have that can actually identify deep fake content. There is media authentication. There is mechanisms for media authentication, including digital signatures, watermarking, to verify authenticity and integrity of the content. There's also source verification, where we can actually do fact checking, with reliable sources for that. There is also legal and policy measures that can be implemented. There is platform responsibility as well. All of these things can help actually reduce deep fake related challenges. And essentially, the process really starts with a combination of R&D, platform responsibility, legal and policy measures, source verification, education and awareness, media authentication, and the detection tools that are available. This can actually help. Today, we have machine learning algorithms and computer vision techniques that can analyze the visual and the audio cues that indicate manipulation. These tools can help identify and flag potentially fraudulent media that can then be verified, through a human in the loop process as well. Hopefully, we answered that question. Next question of this one.
There is one other question, Rangan. So by Herald, what are the limitations or challenges associated with using AI-driven cybersecurity solutions to defend against web-based cyber attacks?
So the limitation actually comes when we do not look at cybersecurity holistically. That's where the issue is. Today, if you really look at it, cybersecurity is a multi-pronged, multifaceted approach. It requires us to essentially look at the industry that we are in. So, for example, if you're really in the healthcare industry, the specific regulations that you have to adhere to. If you are in the financial services industry, the specific regulations that you have to adhere to. So we're not saying that, AI solves all problems. AI plus several other things, need to be in place. Let's give us one example. False positives and false negatives, are a common challenge. Now, you need an effective human in the loop process. We are not advocating for 100%, artificial intelligence. It's artificial plus human intelligence is where the opportunity lies. And specifically, what we do essentially is to leverage AI where it best serves the purpose and where humans are best part of the loop. And that's a very important distinction, because if you want to keep upping the game, there is a level of human in the loop intervention that is really required to make the algorithms better. There's many processes of AI. You have supervised learning, you have unsupervised learning, you have reinforcement, you have deep learning. All of these methods require, extremely good data sets, really require the algorithms that need to be in place. So you can have superior algorithms, but if they're not trained on the right level of data, it won't work. Taking the metaphor of humans, all of us have roughly the same brain, roughly the same intelligence. But what we do with that essentially segments the good from the bad, the good from the great, etc. So that's really the approach.
So that looks like we're out of time. So that would conclude today's session. So I'd like to thank you all for joining today's webinar, and thank you to our speakers as well as the participants. For more information on upcoming webinars, security advisories, and newsletters, please do follow us on LinkedIn. So thank you all for your time, and we hope to see you all soon.
Thank you, everybody.